The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Good evening and welcome to my State of Mind. I am Dan Yorke. This has been a whirlwind weekend with the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsberg and the frenzy that is surrounding it. The politics and culture have clashed again, and it is going to be one incredible election season in the midst of a nomination process. And I think it's important for us to be able to distinguish between that which may alarm us and offend us with our politics and that which is constitutionally protected to do. An objective conversation with Joe Cammarano, a political science professor from Providence College, on that very thing coming up here in just a moment. He is my guest this evening. First, though, here's what the network reported on the story itself.
Mourners gathered in front of the Supreme Court to pay tribute to Ruth Bader Ginsberg.
She was such a voice for women, myself included. I feel so much of what I have today in this country is because of her and the ideals she fought for.
Ginsberg was only the second woman ever picked to serve on the nation's highest court.
I, Ruth Bader Ginsberg, do solemnly swear.
She arrived with an impressive resume. In the 1970s, the native New Yorker was an architect for the women's rights movement. She argued 6 cases before the Supreme Court and won 5. As a Supreme Court justice, Ginsberg was a strong liberal voice, often championing gender equality and civil rights. She was a hero to many.
She was the moral beacon when America felt lost.
President Trump also had kind words for Ginsberg.
She was an amazing woman who led an amazing life. I'm actually sad to hear that.
The president will nominate Ginsberg's replacement, likely from a list of candidates he's already put together. But Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden says the choice should be made after the election.
Voters should pick the president, and the president should pick the justice for the Senate to consider.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has vowed to hold a confirmation vote for President Trump's nominee.
And so my go-to guy for all that is national politics in a lot of ways is Joe Cammarano, Providence College political science professor. Joe, this is a time that it seems to me to be just another wow moment for those who crave a little bit of culture and a little bit of couth in politics. The passing of Ruth Bader Ginsberg, and the reaction so immediate. But before we actually join that fracas by evaluating it that way, we really ought to spend a couple of minutes talking about Ruth Bader Ginsberg and the life that she led and the profundity that she was and leaves on this country.
Yeah, I agree. I think that if you look at our lives, what has happened for the opportunity of women is just almost incomprehensible. The notion that a woman didn't have equal opportunity to a man, whether it's in playing sports or access to sports or going to college or getting a job, all of that's changed. Women can serve on juries, and that's in our lifetime. They can get their own credit, which is also in our lifetime. Actually, I was in 8th grade when that happened. And so Ruth Bader Ginsberg has been part of this dramatic movement in liberal feminism to allow women the opportunity to at least go for an equal chance in the world. And that's what she stood for. Everything she did was toward equality and applying equal protection to women. And, that's a really, really significant achievement for more than half of our population. I think that's really important.
Yeah. The changes that occurred in her lifetime are profound. I hope that in the midst of this rush to replace her, that the country will be able to pause to celebrate her.
That would be nice. Again, we owe her a debt of gratitude for the work she did, even if we don't always agree with everything she stood for. The idea that, even Brett Kavanaugh, who has daughters, when he was going up for confirmation, was talking about, I have daughters, I want to see them to have an equal chance at life. That frame is determined in part by the work Ruth Bader Ginsberg did over the course of her life. And that's a real big achievement.
Yet, at least immediately, and maybe the echo chamber, maybe the sound of the immediate response by Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump brought us to a place where we didn't hear any of those reflections. Hopefully this thing calms down, because I think the reflections will help the country. We've got to be more thoughtful about this stuff. We have to be able to differentiate ideology, points of view, from the character and contribution that public servants have made. And there's already movies about her life story, and I'm glad she was able to see a lot of that in real time. But 87 years on this planet, no matter what your politics, it's nourishing for us to celebrate that. If we just run through this and just say, well, there's a lefty that's gone off there's a lefty that's gone off the court, but what happens to us? I don't know.
Right, and Eugene Scalia, the son of the late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, wrote a wonderful piece in the Washington Post about the relationship that his father and Ruth Bader Ginsberg, two ideological opponents, constitutional opponents, had a different way of seeing the Constitution and what it meant and how it applied. They were the deepest of friends, and it was a touching story of what is increasingly a bygone era, where your friendship is more important than your partisanship. And so I think it's important for us to pause and think about that, as well as memorialize her contribution, and to do it as an American, not as a Democrat or a liberal.
All right, when we come back, we will talk about the politics of this, because they were quick, no doubt. Joe Cammarano, Providence College professor, on My State of Mind. Stay with us, please. Welcome back to My State of Mind. I'm Dan Yorke. Joe Cammarano, Providence College political science professor, is with us. Now, we spent a little bit of time talking about the gift that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was to the country. As some eyes are rolling now, over that because of the politics. Let's talk about it. Custom and culture for honoring public service and taking some time to reflect on it, out the window. Contrast this with, look, Harry Reid pulled some stunts early on, and now we've got a situation where the Republican Senate wouldn't allow Barack Obama to have a Merrick Garland Supreme Court nomination with 230 some odd days before an election. Here we are, 40 days in front of an election, or less than that, and we're going to spring to a nominee and a confirmation process. Holy cow!
Well, I guess I'm going to anger both sides here. On the one hand, I really think that we need to say it is constitutionally legitimate for the president to nominate and for the Senate to confirm. So if you look at the strict legal limitations, that's okay. The Republicans have a right to do this. They don't have an obligation, and that's the other side. So the Democrats need to acknowledge, look, if they can do this, we'll fight tooth and nail. We'll try to get 4 Republicans to say no. But if enough Republicans say yes, there is a constitutional legitimacy to this process that we're not going to like. On the other hand, the Republicans have forgotten one of the things that party traditionally stands for is this notion of civic virtue, is this notion that we serve everybody, not just those that we agree with. And that idea of constraint has been one of the important bonds that has prevented us from going with wild swings one way or the other. And to do this, in a bald-faced contradiction to what they advocated for stridently, swearing that the next time, if they were on the other side, they'd have the same position, A, undermines our faith that politicians say anything we trust, but B, starts what is essentially the beginning of a war of attrition, where you have an increasingly minority party ruling the country. The Republican Party is essentially a minority party. They haven't gotten the majority of the votes in the presidential election, and you're going to see them kind of grasp onto these anti-majority ways of keeping power. And the other side is going to start just using majority rule to ram down the throats of the minority whatever they want. So I'm really worried about the system stability as a result of this.
Yeah. So it is funny that you say, funny, interesting, not funny, haha. I understand. Look, president's the president. He's got the nominating power. The Senate. I mean, they're there. But it's their own argument that in a 200+ day time frame that they used to prevent Merrick Garland's nomination, and the audio that I heard over the weekend, Lindsey Graham from South Carolina was so strident in his defense of the notion that Merrick Garland shouldn't be nominated, and the timeline, and you hold me accountable. And by the way, he's got a race in South Carolina. His opponent's gonna play that every single day. And I wonder whether process will matter to the American people, or is it just going to be the product, the outcome? It'll be amazing.
Right. And, remember, process determines outcome over the long haul. So if you throw out what is a sort of an informal but a norm that you at least don't do everything that you can do because you don't want to be in the minority the next time and suffer the consequences of the other side doing the same. Without that, I do think we have some trouble. The one thing I think I want to point to that you mentioned is the elections could possibly prevent this from happening. Martha McSally, Cory Gardner, they're in very tough fights for re-election, and it's quite possible there's a special election. Mark Kelly might become the next senator from Arizona. He'll get the vote after the election immediately. And so that's why they're trying to rush it through now. But the election forces could determine whether or not this gets delayed. Yeah.
Well, what about the logistics? Let's talk about the logistics. I mean, really? I mean, how are the mechanics of the Senate going to actually work through this entire thing? Clearly, the Republicans have nominees, in the queue. They've already talked about it. But how fast can they actually literally operate this?
They can ram it through before the election. There's no doubt about that. But the other thing is, if they do that, they could suffer significant negative electoral effects. And I think that Republicans need to understand that if they do this, they're going to look really bad. And when people go into the voting booth, it very well could move 4 or 5% of the voting population in the other direction and have significant consequences for them in the results.
Well, let's talk about Joe Cammarano, of course, is with us from Providence College. Well, let's talk about what's at stake. I mean, look, this is a Supreme Court now on the complete swing. The abortion issue is front and center here. I was reflecting on it. As a pro-life guy myself, I was thinking, you cannot. It's almost different. It's incredibly difficult to get comfortable in your own shoes in American politics today. Where's the old-fashioned conservative Democrat pro-life? Not there.
Right.
I'm wondering about. I haven't seen a press time. We're recording this on Monday morning for Monday evening. We going to see Bishop Tobin start tweeting a lot about the pro-life part of this whole thing, and start advocating for a fast sprint to what will seem to be a pro-life Supreme Court justice, and to try to turn Roe v. Wade here on a dime. The politics of one issue are going to dominate this and leave a lot of people uncomfortable, I think.
I think that's correct. There's a term we use in public policy called the law of unintended consequences. And it does look like Roe v. Wade will be overturned if indeed President Trump's, whoever the nominee is confirmed. That's not necessarily a good thing for pro-life people. The pro-life movement has benefited greatly from the legacy of Roe versus Wade. It didn't exist, of course. But you're going to see states like California, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New York liberalize their abortion laws because Roe v. Wade basically says let states do it.
Right.
But there are certain restrictions that we're going to put on it. And if they overturn Roe versus Wade, you're likely to see state legislatures get more aggressive in Democratic states in asserting more abortion rights. And so there might actually be more liberal abortion. And the funny thing about this is there's been a generic decline in the number of abortions that started in 1975 and has been uninterrupted regardless of what Supreme Court doctrine has dictated the time. So Roe versus Wade really is not affecting abortion rights. It hasn't. It went up right after, and it's been going down ever since, regardless of who's in charge.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, we often think politics drives everything, and politics doesn't drive the economy. The economy is too big for politics to control. The same is true of the decision that women make about what they're going to do with their lives and whether or not they're going to terminate a pregnancy and have an abortion.
How is this going to affect the presidential election in the sense that this is going to be debated in warp speed? There's nothing that anybody can do about the nomination at the voting booth in November. Because it's going to take place in front of and certainly before. I'm guessing it can bleed over right until January because most seats aren't going to change until January. Correct?
Right.
Right. So it can go through the election cycle. We could be in a situation where the hanging Chad controversy is child's play versus what could happen with protestations over mail-in ballots. So we may have a very contested and lengthy litigation over an election. We would have this thing going on. Does this cause more turnout for certain advocacies? Does it inspire? Is it be careful what you hope for on the Republican side because Democrats get so inspired and angry about this? How does this work?
Yeah, actually, that's a really good question because what usually determines the Republicans' chances of winning at the presidential level is the lack of mobilization by Democrats. Republicans are already motivated, particularly pro-life Republicans. They go and they vote all the time because it means so much to them. And for Democrats, they've always underperformed, meaning if everybody had shown up, Democrats would have done much better. This kind of mobilization effect is going to be probably much stronger for the Democratic side than for the Republican side because there just aren't that many Republicans who are sitting home doing nothing.
Characterize for me what you think this next 35, 40 days is going to feel like.
Proctology exam. To be honest.
And with that, when we come back, we will touch base on the challenges the PC has right now with the COVID virus. Joe's actually doing some yeoman's work along with many other faculty at Providence College regarding this. We'll touch base on that when we return. Stay with us. To my state of mind, only a couple of minutes with Joe Cammarano, PC professor. Listen, the college is in a hyper mode right now, trying to ease the COVID virus pressure. I know you're doing a lot of work as a faculty member there. I don't expect you to speak for the college, but what is your thought about what's happening at PC right now?
Well, I think the first thing is I want to do a shout out to the non-faculty, the staff, particularly the physical plant guys, who have been working hard all summer, moving every single piece of furniture on the campus. And now that we're on lockdown, they're actually delivering the food to the students off campus. And so I want to shout out to sort of the staff and who have done the physical labor to make this work because they've got a lot of heart. The faculty, we're working hard, but I got to be honest, we have it a whole lot easier than everybody else on the campus, including the students.
We've long, Father Shanley, in an interview with me before he left, wondered out loud whether or not the kids would be disciplined enough. We've talked about it. You've mused about this. Father Sicard, now the new president, has written a kind of if we don't do it now, we're done type of email to everybody late last week. The kids off campus can't go on campus. The kids on campus can't leave campus. It's a week's lockdown. If there's a party, you're suspended. I mean, the whole thing is in. Can these kids come through? I guess is the question, because it really is about that, isn't it?
Well, I want to say that the vast majority of the kids have come through, but I wouldn't want to go back and remember the way I behaved when I was their age. They're at an age where you think, oh, just this once. And, then that person goes back to a dorm and just hangs out with a friend in another room, and it spreads. And I think they get it now. And I've talked to a lot of them over the weekends since I'm helping out, tracing all the students who have been in contact. And, I think they really do want to come back, and they are disciplined. I've been on campus, and it's like a ghost town. I call it post-apocalyptic. Few people wandering, security vehicles driving slowly around. I think everybody gets it, and they all want to come back. And so I have faith that they'll do it. The off-campus thing is always going to be a problem, and we all knew that.
All right. Well,
you can't expect change. You can't expect kids not to make mistakes.
Well, they're going to have to come through this week for sure. And comments. Yeah. Joe, thank you so much for your time, and we'll be leaning on you during this whole Supreme Court process. We'll be right back with a final word on my state of mind. Stay with us. It's been a roller coaster 2020 between COVID, some of our challenges with race relations, the presidential race itself, and now a nominee to the Supreme Court. With the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsberg, it is going to be a strap-it-in last quarter in America. And stick around. We'll try to work through it. You have a great evening. Thanks. Talk to you on the radio tomorrow at 3 until 6 on WPRO. Good night.